against that, and I welcome those comments. In relation to sugar reform, different countries come at this from different perspectives. My view is actually very much consistent with the Commission view on this. In my view, we should move away from sugar quotas. We should end them in 2015, just like we're doing with milk, and we should let the market decide who produces sugar in terms of the efficiency of producing it across the European Union. But I also recognise the political reality that that is not the majority view in Council at the moment. And so we need to come to some form of compromise next week on how we come to an end to a sugar quota system in the European Union in a way that everybody can live with, and also how we accommodate the concerns of countries, for example, who were compensated to shut down their sugar industries, like this country was, like Slovenia was, like Portugal was, and actually get out of the sugar business altogether, but were compensated to stay out of the sugar regime until 2015, but not beyond. And so if there is to be an extension of sugar quotas beyond 2015, those countries who may wish to produce sugar for their own domestic markets, who may have serious problems in relation to consistency of supply in relation to sugar, which was very evident last summer, that those countries can also be accommodated in that compromise. So these are the kind of complex issues that we're dealing with. On regionalisation, this is a really important political consideration for a lot of countries. I know that. We are very aware of that on this island for obvious reasons. And so the Commission and indeed the Presidency are very anxious to facilitate different regional models within countries to reflect different political realities within different regions within sovereign countries. So that is something that you will see this Presidency strongly supporting, and indeed I think the European Parliament also. On the issue, finally, of active farmer, I think everybody wants to see active farmers, people who are actually producing food, being the people who are, the priority here in terms of particular direct payments, But it's very difficult to legally define what is an active farmer, given the kind of models that we have in relation to leasing arrangements, in relation to contract farming, and in relation to different farm size and different farm structures across the European Union. And so we will try to get a compromise to ensure that land that draws down funds is being actively farmed, and that we allow flexibility within countries to have measurement criteria around active farming and productivity. But we are limited in terms of what we can do in terms of coupling payments to productivity. We are precluded from doing that. But we will try to work with the system and the restrictions that we have within that system to try and protect active farming, because ultimately that's what this is about. The Common Agricultural Policy is about supporting active farmers producing food in a competitive and sustainable and inclusive way. And that's what the Presidency, working with the Commission and the Parliament, will try and achieve in the coming weeks and months. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Could I thank both the Minister and the Commissioner for taking the time. They have another engagement. But just in conclusion, I think the theme of this morning's session was the Common Agricultural Policy update on the current negotiations. We've certainly seen that progress is made, the timeline is ambitious, but that it is still a very complex issue. And I'd like to thank the members, the delegates from each member state who have made a contribution today. I think it's important that both the Minister and the Commissioner have an opportunity to reflect on the diverse and divergent views and reiterate the challenge that it is to get a compromise and agreement. But I think it's all equally as important for us as representatives from each member state to understand the priorities and the difference of opinion as to how the CAP should finally be negotiated for each other. So remember that within us there's 26 other member states for each one of us. I think we can all agree that at the Commissioner, when he published his proposals back in 2011, that the underpinning principles were to produce as much food as possible in a sustainable fashion and to support rural communities. And I made the point in my opening remarks about the challenge, the twin challenges of producing more food and mitigating climate change. That remains a challenge. I mean, to get the considerable amount of European taxpayers' money into the hands of productivity of food in a sustainable way is what we're about here. And I think that that's the ultimate aim. We cannot give money and reward people who don't produce. And likewise, we have to make sure that the people who have an ability to produce and the potential but have been heretofore restricted are not continuously restricted. And I think that that is what the aim, and I think everybody agrees on that. So if we can work from the point where we have common ground rather than where we have divergence, I hope we can achieve that success. I do wish success to that this process gets into the trilogue negotiations as soon as possible. We would hope that the European Parliament can agree on the MFF and that next week progress is made at the Council meeting with the Commission, so with the Council meeting. So I'm going to suspend for a coffee break. We are a little over time. If people can restrict the coffee break to 20 minutes, we can be back here at 11:25 because the next session promises to be equally as engaging. So I'll ask the chairpersons, when you go outside, if you go, be guided, anyone who has basically a white tag, to go with the ushers out the back door for a photograph, family photograph, before the Commissioner and the Minister depart. So we'll resume at 11:25. Thank you.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One, two, three, four, five. Matt. Matt. Go in and tell him what we're doing, will you? One, two, three, four, five. One, two, three, four, five.
Welcome back. If everybody could take their seats, we'll start session 2. Okay. As I mentioned in my opening comments, the topic for this session is young farmers. This is a very important issue which we're about to debate. It's expected that 4.5 million farmers will retire in the 10 years up to 2022. Of a total of 13 million farmers in the entire European Union, only 7% are aged below 35. And you heard Minister Coveney say in his address earlier that in Ireland we have more farmers over the age of 80 than under the age of 35, which doesn't lend itself to getting the production of our farmland up to the levels we need if we're going to meet the demand for global food demand. So I'd like to welcome our 3 speakers for this session. Firstly, we have Dr. Karina Pearce, lecturer in Dairy Production, School of Agriculture, Food and Science at University College Dublin, speaking about education and training for young farmers. Then we have Mr. Lauren Franz, Vice President of the European Council of Young Farmers, speaking about measures that can be taken across Europe to improve access to farming. And finally, Mr. James Murphy, Agricultural Science graduate and Stephen Cullinan Scholar from County Clare in Ireland, who will make a presentation on his experience of his visit and farming in New Zealand. So can I call now our first speaker, Mrs. Dr. Karina Pearce.
The microphone needs to be on, please. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Chairpersons of the Agriculture and Fisheries Committees, I am honoured to be here today to speak to you on the topic of innovation in agricultural education and training for young farmers. The Food Harvest 2020 document that was commissioned in 2010 clearly outlined ambitious growth targets for all aspects of the Irish agri-food sector. And among those targets was a 50% increase in the volume output from the dairy sector and a 40% increase in the output value from the beef sector. Obviously, the ambitious targets for dairy reflect the abolition of milk quotas in 2015. So when we look at this document, there are significant opportunities in the agri-food sector for young people and for employment. And the session 1 earlier this morning highlighted some of these opportunities. But clearly education and training and a skilled labour force are key to realising these opportunities. And in fact, the document itself states this clearly in that a key determinant of the future success of the Irish agri-food sector is the people that work in that sector. And it also states that there is an ongoing need to attract the best people into the sector and to enhance the leadership and managerial skills of those working within the sector. Now, this recognition of the importance of young blood into the agri-food sector is very important given the ageing profile of Irish farmers. And data from in the last couple of years shows that the average age of farmers is higher now than it was back in 2000. So this is obviously of great concern, and we've heard some of these figures already this morning. It also showed that more than half of all farmers in 2010 were 55 or older. But as we know, this is not just an Irish problem. It's in many cases an EU-wide problem. And the Chairman gave these figures there just a moment ago, that of a total of 13 million farmers, only 7% in the EU are aged below 35. So this is an incredibly important figure. And another figure earlier on was that we have more farmers over 80 than we have under 35. So really what I want to show in this slide is just to highlight, without getting concerned about the figures, but that in Ireland the demand for agriculture and horticulture courses has increased by about 100% since 2008. So this obviously reflects other things that have been happening in the Irish economy since that time, but clearly shows that school leavers are looking at agriculture and farming and the wider agri-food sector for their future career. I work in University College Dublin, which is the largest university in the country and is located very close to us here in Dublin Castle. And this graph on the bottom of this slide shows that the minimum points, now the points reflect demand for courses, has increased by more than 40% since 2007. So again, this is highlighting the confidence that students leaving school and perhaps their parents have in future careers in farming and the wider agri-food sector. Results have come out in the last few days for 2013. So students applied for their courses in January of this year for entry in in September. And what it is showing that there's a further increase of 6.6% in demand for agricultural courses in Ireland. So again, that this confidence in the sector for careers for young people is increasing. So there's a large range, as there is across Europe, of courses available in Ireland in agriculture. And these are available through agricultural colleges, through institutes of technology, and also in the University College Dublin that I work in. And you can see in this slide that this just highlights the range of programmes available for students. This is just in UCD. So students enter into general agriculture and then branch out into areas such as agri-environmental science, animal and crop production, dairy business, animal science, equine. So a large number of offerings available to students. The ones I have highlighted in red are among our most popular courses, and these courses although this varies obviously from year to year, but predominantly students coming from a farming background and would seek careers in farming where those opportunities available to them. So these are courses such as animal and crop production, animal science and dairy business. So for the most part these students come from a farming background and would go back to farming if the option was available to them. So one course that I coordinate in the university is only recently developed over the last 4 years. So our first intake of students was in 2009, and so our first graduates will be coming out in this September 2013, or this May, sorry, 2013. So this is a Bachelor of Agricultural Science in Dairy Business, and this course was developed after extensive consultation with relevant stakeholders. So it's responding to industry demand. And it was designed to provide students entering the dairy sector, so that's dairy farming and the wider industry, with a high level of scientific, technical and business skills. And as a Bachelor of Agricultural Science, the early years concentrate quite a lot on basic sciences, but there's also a significant focus on animal husbandries, on agriculture and the environment, on communication and IT skills. But importantly, for new courses coming on stream, there's an increased focus on business, and this is in recognition of the fact that future farmers are going to need a greater business acumen and greater business skills than they currently do. So the students throughout the 4 years take modules in farm business management, leadership to promote self-development, entrepreneurship, managing people in agriculture and agricultural economics as well. But I suppose my role here today is to talk about innovation, and an important part of this programme is the fact that it's a collaborative programme. So it's the university working with Teagasc, which is the Irish Agricultural and Education Development Authority. So it's a collaborative programme with Teagasc, and the students during the 3rd year of the 4-year programme leave the university for a full year. And one of those semesters they spend in a Teagasc dairy research Centre, where they take applied modules in grassland management, in breeding, in herd health, milk quality, in a research-intensive environment. The other semester, they take place or they undertake professional work experience or an internship. And that internship is very important. It's carried out over a 5-month period from July to December. And the students take their internship on the most progressive farms in Ireland, but we strongly encourage the students to travel abroad. And our destination of choice for these Irish students is to New Zealand, where they get to be involved in calving and breeding on large-scale farms in New Zealand and bring back that experience with them. So this internship is another very, very important component, where the students are labour units on the farms they work on, but there are clear learning outcomes to be achieved. So they are not just labour, they are students, and both the farmers and the students sign up to these learning outcomes, which I then assess through monthly reports, final reports, and also through oral examinations at the end of their internship. Another recent development in Ireland is a professional diploma in dairy farm management. So the students this again is a collaborative programme between Teagasc and the University College Dublin, and these students have a minimum of 2 years agricultural education before they embark on this programme. And this programme is basically a 2-year internship on the most progressive farms in Ireland, and again students are also encouraged to travel abroad to gain that experience. Because of the fact that students are working on farms, the delivery needs to be different than that I have explained up until now. So students are released on block release for 1, 2 or maybe 5-day courses depending on the time of the year, and they undertake modules again around managing people, around planning for expansion, post-milk quotas, farm management and so on. So they learn by different methods as well. They become involved in discussion groups, there's class lectures, workshops and so on. So there's a variety of learning mechanisms here too. There is quite a lot of research going on in Ireland at the present time around knowledge transfer, technology uptake at farm level. And one of the students embarking in this programme is a PhD student, Roberta MacDonald. And what Roberta's studies have focused on are the characteristics of new entrants to dairying in Ireland from the years of 2009 to 2011. And her research is clearly showing that what we have, the people entering dairy farming are younger than the average, so an average age of 36. They're highly educated and very ambitious young farmers. So what we have here is an educated group, an ambitious group, and we need, I suppose, continued education is very, very important for these, that we continue to skill in this group in terms of managerial skills and so on. And discussion groups have a very important role to play here. And this slide is showing, again, it's Irish data, but looking at the number of discussion groups. So this is groups of farmers and maybe groups of 15 that meet each other on a regular basis, a monthly basis with the facilitator. And they exchange information and they learn from their advisor or the consultant. And that there are increased numbers of farmers and discussion groups in Ireland. Now, there was incentives to encourage farmers to enter into these discussion groups, but research would show that that farmers are clearly indicating that once that incentive goes, that they see the benefit in discussion groups and are very likely to stay. So as a method of continuing to upskill farmers and continued education, this is a very important mechanism. And it's not just for dairy. I supervise a student at the minute, Alan O'Brien, who's doing a master's thesis on beef farmer engagement in discussion groups, and showing again that these farmers engaging in discussion groups are younger than the average, larger farm size, but also an educated group as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to conclude after that relatively brief presentation with a few key points, and hopefully then we can engage in good debate after the next speakers. That there are a lot of positives at the present time in terms of large numbers of highly educated young graduates and farmers entering and looking to enter the sector. But there are a significant number of challenges there. For educators, the challenge is to continue to innovate. We must continue to keep the curriculum relevant to changing requirements. As we've heard in the morning session, there are continually requirements are changing in terms of sustainability, climate change, expansion post-quota, IT skills, business skills, precision agriculture and so on. And for the policymakers, the challenge is to ensure that there are opportunities for these young, ambitious, educated young farmers in the sector. So with that, Gura Mila Mahagav, thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion afterwards.
Thank you, Karina. I now ask Mr. Lauren Francis, who I should have said is farms in Luxembourg, to make his address.
Dear chairpersons, dear ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to speak at this important meeting here today. My name is Laura Franz. I'm a vice president of CEJA, the European Council of Young Farmers. I am a young farmer myself. I have a dairy farm in the south of Luxembourg. I am here today to talk to you about the young farmers' measures in the CAP reform and why they are so important. We are just days away from the European Parliament establishing its official position on CAP reform in vote in plenary. The Agriculture Committee supports CEJA's position, and we rely on the rest of the MEPs to follow their advice and support, most importantly, a mandatory top-up of direct payment for young farmers and installation aid with an 80-20 co-financing ratio under rural development. Achieving these objectives within the CAP reform is essential for the future of food production in Europe. You must have heard about the alarming statistics. Only 6% of European farmers are under 35. The figure is similar here in Ireland, where there are more farmers over the age of 80 than under 35. European agriculture is in age crisis. We need to act now with this reform. 2020 will be too late to secure a sustainable future for EU agriculture. As demand for food grows across the world and demand for high quality, safe food continue to grow at home, we cannot ignore the challenge of food security. We are running out of farmers, yet we need to produce more and more food. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. We do not just need young farmers to secure food production, we need them to innovate it. With limited resources, we stand for the challenge to make food production more environmentally sustainable, more competitive and more efficient. Do not make the mistake of attempting to achieve the objective of food security and climate change mitigation without the help of innovative, well-trained young agriculture entrepreneurs who are so eager to make their own the future. All these issues are interlinked. In agriculture, environmental and economic sustainability simply cannot be achieved without demographic sustainability. On average in the EU, a young farmer is 40% more productive than an older farmer. Young farmers are more environmentally conscious, technological minded, and more than anything, better trained than old farmers. Just look at Ireland, a country where agriculture colleges are oversubscribed, and yet you still do not have enough young farmers here. This alone is proof that it is not the lack of ambitions, well-trained young people intending to enter the sector that's the problem, but the barriers they stand in the way. These barriers are the access to land, the access to credit, low return on investment in the first year of your farm. As a young farmer myself, I know that the biggest challenge in a farmer's career is the setting up. getting your food through the farm gate. That is why the CAP reform must address these challenges through a combination of target measures. These measures should consist of a top-up of direct payment for young farmers under Pillar 1 of the CAP. This is to protect a young farmer from the price fluctuation and market volatility in the most fragile years of his career. This should be in combination with installation aid under rural development, which should be available to all young farmers at a favourable co-financing ratio of 80% coming from the EU and only 20% from the Member States, encouraging as high take-up access the EU as possible. It is essential that both young farmer measures, the top-up and installation aid, are implemented across the Union. Young farmers across Europe deserve a level playing field. The set of measures would not only provide this, but would also provide a clear political message to the future of generations. Europe believes in their ability to meet the challenges of increasing global food demands alongside decreasing natural resources and climate concerns. Yes, we need greener agriculture production, and yes, we need to ensure the efficiency of use decreasing resources in future. But before we can do all that, we need to secure young people's access to the sector. Young farmers across Europe need you to tell your minister to turn words into the concrete actions to secure these measures. It is crucial that we secure the adequate natural resources, financial resources, and most importantly, human resources to keep European agriculture alive and well. I would like to thank you for attending and for inviting me here today, and I look forward to answering any question you may have on SEJA's position.
Thank you, Mr. Franz. Now can I call on Mr. Murphy to give his opening address?
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to welcome all the chairs of the Agriculture and Fisheries Committee here today. I am delighted to get the opportunity to speak on behalf of the young farmers of Ireland, and I would like to focus on a structure seen in New Zealand as a way forward for potential application in Ireland. So firstly, just to give some background, I grew up on a beef and sheep farm in the west of Ireland and have been passionate about agriculture from a very young age. So it was therefore a natural progression for me to study agriculture, and I spent 4 years in University College Dublin. It was during this period that I developed a keen interest in dairy farming, and in order to further my knowledge and experience of dairy farming, I decided to spend some time in New Zealand. This was made possible by funding from our own national farming organisation, youth farming organisation, Macra na Firma, and the Irish Farmers Journal. So the Stephen Cullinan Scholarship allowed me to travel to New Zealand and see the structures that they have in place to allow young people grow in the industry. So on my return from New Zealand, my personal aim was to get into dairy farming and get into farm ownership. So I looked at the possibilities that are here in Ireland and asked myself the question, is it possible for a person to start off with zero and get up into farm ownership? Previous generations have found this extremely difficult, with a lot of young farmers getting to the farm management step and not being able to get any further in their career. So my proposal today is to put a structure in place which allows young farmers get from that farm manager step up through a structure to get to farm ownership. So this progression is extremely important for Ireland and other European countries, especially as there is such opportunity in the coming years. The decision to abolish milk quota in 2015 will pave the way for expansion in the dairy industry, and this has to be driven by young farmers. Coupled with that, the Department of Agriculture in Ireland have set out very ambitious production targets in the Food Harvest 2020 report, with a 50% increase in milk output targeted. And again, young farmers are needed to drive this. All of these growth targets are in line with an increase in world demand for dairy products. So it is a good industry that we should be backing. So Ireland's position is in a great position to make to realise these opportunities, due to the fact that we have such a sustainable and profitable milk production system, which is based on grass. As well as that, as Karina and Lawrence have said, that there is a lot of young farmers, highly skilled and highly educated, coming into the industry, and we need a structure in place that will allow them to develop and grow in the industry. So, from an Ireland perspective, the main weaknesses in our system are the age profile of farmers and the access to land. So, figures have been quoted, and just to reiterate them again, so only 6.2% of farmers are under the age of 35, and this figure has decreased by 52% since 2000. So the problem is getting worse, and we need to stop that decline. To compound that, 26.3% of farmers are over the age of 65 in Ireland. So this highlights to me that the current structure of the single farm payment isn't targeting, isn't supporting the regeneration of young farmers into the industry, and this needs to be addressed. If this issue is not addressed, it'll lead to age imbalance increasing, and result in the potential of the youth not being achieved. So it's important that every country tackles this issue, because it is a European-wide problem. As well as that, it will have an effect on the European family farm model, which has been pushed from the very start of CAP. Secondly, gaining access to land is a big issue for young farmers starting off. And this is going to increase, and I think the structure of single farm payment increases this difficulty. Many farmers in Ireland are holding on to land just to receive their single farm payment entitlements, and this is restricting the number of farmers coming into the industry. So maybe we should look at putting structures in place that can also help farmers move out of the industry as well and support them. So just to talk about New Zealand and the structures that they have there in place, and which have been extremely successful over the years. So if you can see from this diagram here, an individual can start off with a net worth of 0 and build their way up through extreme hard work to get to farm ownership. These individuals are highly skilled and highly motivated people, and it takes time, but the structure is there, and when they start off, they know it's achievable, so they work hard at it. So the diagram illustrates this. So the main structure behind it is kind of share milking, and this idea is whereby a contract is drawn up between the farm owner and a share milker, and the costs and benefits of running a dairy farm are split between the farm owner and the share milker. So I believe the two most relevant steps for this for Europe and for Ireland are the low order share milking step and the 50-50 share milking step. So low order share milking is the next step after farm management, which will allow share milkers to build their own equity within the farm business, and this is the first step to getting on to farm ownership career ladder, in my opinion. As the table indicates, the low order share milker will provide all of the labour, pay for the equipment and machinery, as well as cover the milking shed running expenses. And the landowner will provide the land, farm infrastructure, most of the variable costs, and the cows. In return, the low order share milker will receive 17 to 23% of the milk check. So this is an excellent incentive for both the farmer and the share milker to get involved in sort of a partnership agreement where they'll farm efficiently, and the rewards will be split between both parties depending on the risk and the amount of equity put in by both parties. So the next step then in the New Zealand system is 50-50 share milking. So in this step there is an increase in the amount of equity put in by the share milker, So they will now supply the cows, the labour and machinery, and most of the variable costs. And the landowner will put in land, farm infrastructure, and pay for 50% of any imported feeds. So in this scenario, the milk check will be set 50-50. And this is a huge incentive for the share milker to be as profitable as he possibly can and be as efficient as possible. And this is an excellent step in building equity and getting a step closer to farm ownership. So the question I'm putting out here today is, could this New Zealand share milking structure work in Ireland and in other EU member states? So evidence from New Zealand states that the most popular herd size for a 50-50 or a low order share milker is 200 to 500 cows. And for a lot of countries in Europe, this is overly ambitious, but I think this is achievable in Ireland if structures are put in place to help with the mobility of land and getting land into young farmers' hands. So what are the benefits of share milking? So share milking will provide an entry pathway for young farmers to get into agriculture. It will be equitable to both parties, so the landowner and the share milker will receive a lot from the agreement, and both will be able to grow within this agreement. As well as that, a lot of farm owners at the moment, especially in Ireland, have family attachments to land and want to hold on to land, keep it in the family name. And this agreement will allow that to occur and to protect their asset base while also generating a positive cash flow, and this will entice in young progressive farmers. But it's important to realise that scale is necessary for this to be successful, and tax incentives for both parties must be included in order to make it successful. So in conclusion, I would just like to sum up and give my recommendations on what I think we should be focusing on. Firstly, I believe a structure needs to be set up to map career paths for young people. And this is obviously going to be different in each member state due to different types of agriculture which are being performed in each country. As well as that, so from an Ireland perspective, I think share milking could be used as a model and adapted to Irish circumstances. So research and development support needs to be used to maximise this, and each country needs to take on the responsibility to put support to research and development so they can come up with this structure. Secondly, I think positive regulations with regard to young farmers need to be brought in. Focus needs to be held on getting farmers started up, so getting them to build equity from the start. For example, stock supports should be prioritised. And finally, the access to land is crucial. So structures need to be put in place which will accommodate both the landowner and the young farmer coming in. As well as that, support should be targeted towards the young farmer, as they will have a knock-on effect on the elderly farmer when profitability and efficiency increases. So thank you for your attention. I hope I've given you some food for thought.
Thank you, James. I'll now call our first speaker. First speaker is Mr. Paolo Russo from the Italian Chamber of Deputies.
Thanks. Dear Mr. President, dear colleagues, agricultural Europe has now to provide more than any other quick and prompt answers to important issues which concern not only production of the member states but also the growing demand of the quality and the traceability. We aim for a different Europe, no more Europe of duties and bans, Europe of banks and bureaucracy. This is time for Europe to change. We want the Europe of different agricultural systems, different productions, different traditions. A Europe which provides its member states the same opportunities and not the same model for everyone. We aim for a Europe able to make the most of diversity and variety. Therefore, young farmers play a dominant role in this match. Due to high potential that farms run by them represent, it can be firmly stated that the young farmers are the future and the heart of modern agriculture, not merely integration policy. Besides these, two absolutely required and indispensable things have to be done to tackle technical barriers and improve technology. Let's give the young farmers the chance of update the system, creating also faster web connection for them. We don't have to target only economical resources and credits access. Let's target young farmers. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Mr. Dion Gross of the Dutch House of Representatives.
The Dutch Parliament welcomes the special attention that has been given to this topic during this conference. It welcomes the new possibilities to support this specific group of farmers within the CAP, especially in the first pillar. The House has also demanded that the investment regulations for young farmers that is now part of the second pillar will be continued in the new budget period. More in general, the Dutch House thinks that there should be a fairer earning model for farmers and fishermen. This is especially true for young farmers, since they have to be able to earn a good and stable income for many years to come. The House has therefore urged the government to strengthen the market power of farmers in the food chain, whereby the EU can play an important role in view of strengthening of the internal market. Finally, the House of Representatives demanded that only active farmers are eligible for direct income support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Mr. Germinal Piero of the French National Assembly.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Young farmers and getting young farmers started isn't a European problem without farmers, or certainly young farmers under 35. In our country, the renewal rate is around 60%. So 6 farms for 10 farmers trying to get started. So these figures speak very strongly. But we've gone from 17,000 down to 16,000 down to 13,000 in recent years. And if we compare the low number of farms with or the young farmers getting started with the rate at which farms are disappearing, well, we've seen 25% over recent years. And you can see, therefore, that it really is a very difficult problem, a very serious problem. And so I think it's very good that we're discussing it at this level. And thank you to the European Union for doing this. But it isn't only a question of money for farmers. At a social level, this is a career that is somewhat derided. It isn't quite so accepted. So I think we have to make sure that we put a positive spin on farming as a job, as a career. But also there is a problem of access to land and access to credit as well. And to go into detail on the proposals made, we think that aid under the first pillar through the premium to be paid over the first 5 years. This would be an additional aid per hectare. This will benefit those that have the land, those that have the hectares, and those that have more of them. And it isn't necessarily going to meet the needs of those farmers on small holdings, in particular those in forestry and other areas. And then when it comes to a premium for hectares, we do not think that this necessarily responds to or meets all cases. I think we have to have a possibility where we can have young farmers starting on a small holding. And this would certainly meet the needs of a number of European countries and would also bear into mind diversity in agriculture, or take into account, I should say, diversity in agriculture. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Ulrich Hufken from the German Federal Council.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you. I share the objective of the Irish presidency, who said this should be an optional solution for member states. They can decide what is best for their national situation, which is, of course, is differing. I'm an agricultural engineer, and I worked my own farm for a long time. And I share the objective of improving education and training and support further training and acquiring of qualifications for farmers. And because at the end of the day, I think workers should play a role. A modern farming should be targeted at qualified employees, and they aren't always necessarily those already on the land. There's one difficulty with the Commission's proposal. There's so many issues and questions related to it. The full-time operation of the holding, strange cut-off threshold 40. I think that's quite old. And other issues related to these optional rules. We're not happy with all of the proposals there. But what you were saying at the beginning, looking at the quantitative increase, 40% for beef or dairy as increase in production, I think the responsible approach and efficient use of resources needs to be the rule of thumb there. We have 50% wastage on agricultural products. At the moment, we're producing sufficient calories for 12 million people. So we need to have a better management of our raw materials. If you look at milk in terms of production and cost developments, we're looking at 40 or 50 cents at the moment. And we need to look at whether there's more market balance rather than surplus production and dumping another member state. That certainly can't be the objective.
Thank you. I'll take one more contributor before I revert back to the panel. And we've Ms. Anne McIntosh from the UK.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just say 3 excellent contributions are very stimulating. In spite of my wind-up to the good doctor, she was not falling for it. Can I just say, what I've seen, I represent now more hills and small farms in my new constituency than I did before, and a lot is upland farming. I've seen a great change to farming practices where fewer people, fewer workers are employed on the land. And it is down to the bare family members on small farms who are working on the farm. The other aspect is it tends to be mixed farming in the hills and on the lower bits as well. We've got the largest fat stock mart in the country at Thirsk, where the calves are born in the hills and then they're fattened on the plains. And mixed farming has the attribute that if one sector is down, then hopefully another sector might be up. So sheep meat at the moment is not earning very much, but beef seems to be doing a little bit better. So the the questions I'd like to put is on the question of access to land. We have a very feudal system in North Yorkshire, which is very surprising. I've probably got the highest concentration historically of big landowners and many, many tenants. This poses particular problems on common land, where you get grazing rights in perpetuity of tenant farmers who may be tenants elsewhere but have grazing rights, also trying to share the farming interest with people who have grouse moors on that same land. So under CAP rules, it's always difficult to identify who the most active farmer is. And I don't know if in Ireland there are similar problems there, particularly in common land, but also just looking at the model that James Murphy set out, whether tenancies lend themselves to this kind of advancement, and whether the sector would work in, the milk share model would work in other sectors than milk. that would be of interest. And just looking at the educational aspect, we've seen, I think, a great advance as well in agricultural colleges. Huge numbers want to do equine studies. But in terms of agriculture, what is the take-up of those? I think Dr. Pearce mentioned that many of the courses are taken up by students who wish to return to the land. They come from a farm and want to return to the land. What's the take-up of courses from those who genuinely want to enter farming as a new entrant at a young age and have no prior knowledge and know where to go afterwards? Where does their future lie?
Thank you. I'll now go to the panel. Who wants to start? Dr. Pearce.
Okay, I'll start and thank you. I realise that a lot of there weren't so much questions as comments, but just to reiterate, Mr. Russo from Italy, in terms of young farmers of the future, I think that that's key. And really, you know, the level of education that a lot of these farmers have means that they have, you know, they are going to be among the most efficient. And so the promotion of efficiency at farm level, which I suppose backs up what Ms. Hufkin was saying in terms of we need qualified employees, we need people who are efficient, and I think we're producing those people. It's not a lack of ambition in those people, it's a lack of opportunities thereafter, and I think that that's a big issue. The acceptability of farming, which was the comment from Germany, as a career, I think that that's improving in Ireland anyway in recent times, and again that does reflect, I suppose, what has happened elsewhere in the economy in Ireland since 2008, where we've seen a large decline in numbers of students maybe taking courses such as engineering, architecture, auctioneering and so on, and coinciding with that we've seen a large increase in students entering agricultural colleges and universities and so on to study agriculture. So I think the acceptability of farming as a career is improving, but that's something that we do need to continue to work on. But that will only improve in the longer term for students and so on if there really is a career in farming. It will be quickly seen if there isn't. If students and the large numbers that we're seeing coming through this college system now is not realised with a career, and the comment was made also that it's more than just about money, and I would agree with that completely. It's not just about profit. There needs to be an acceptability of lifestyle and so on. So students and parents will quickly see that if farming is not providing a career, and we'll see a drop off in numbers again. So we do need to watch that very, very carefully. Ms McIntosh's question from the UK in terms of I suppose for starters you mentioned the huge numbers doing equine studies in the UK. That has been a trend in the university as well, where a new programme in animal science equine was developed. This year we've seen a fall in first preferences, and these are figures only out today, yesterday, of 48%, a fall of 48% in students looking to study equine. And again, I suppose that reflects the economy and so on. So students do pay attention, contrary to what we might think sometimes, do pay attention to what's happening out there, and I suppose very much directed by the parents. We don't know the exact breakdown of students as they come into the university, and that's the one I can speak about most clearly, and a lot of what I talk about is anecdotal. And some of our biggest courses, animal and crop production, animal science and dairy business, are among our most popular. A lot of those students come from a farming background and would like to return farming, but that doesn't necessarily mean to their own farms, because if you're not the oldest child, and often the oldest male child in Ireland, the farms are in many cases not big enough for two siblings to work. So while they'd love to go farming, it's not necessarily back to their own farm. So clearly a lot of these students, the vast majority, if they had an opportunity to farm, they would. It doesn't mean on their own home farm, but if they could get on the ladder, that's what they're looking for. So I hope that in some ways answers your question. Just in terms of demand for courses, the course I coordinate, one of the courses, Dairy Business, has seen, again in the figures for 2013, a 36% increase. where we've seen a fall of 48% increase for equine dairy business. So that will show that students again are showing confidence in the sector, and now we just need to match that with opportunities for them thereafter.
Thank you, Dr. Pearce. Do either Mr. Franz?
When I look at the positions put forward by the representatives from various countries, I can see that the problems of young farmers is an issue that everybody's aware of and have problems that need to be addressed, and everybody's taking a different approach to solving the challenge of getting young farmers into farming. We have various geographical challenges, weather challenges, climate challenges, and obviously the responses to those will be different. But the responsibility for a young farmer when they take over a farm is the same, regardless of the climate conditions or the region they're operating in. Access to land, access to finance for building up their farm and making further investments. Those challenges are faced by young farmers across the community. And given that the challenges are the same across Europe, that means that we need the same support across Europe for young farmers. In Sage's mind, the measures that are voluntary measures in the first pillar and just beefing those up isn't enough of a solution to our mind. Countries have the possibility for investment aid in Pillar 2. But it gives farmers a lot of maneuverability as to how they access the funds and what they do with them. Another point that was addressed by Ms. Hofgren is an issue that we hear a lot in conferences, improving quality as well as quantity. To my mind, the farmer who is most likely to be successful in the future is those that can build on output from their farming. That's a sustainability criteria. Those farmers that can manage to be more productive are those that will survive, those that will farm in the future. Those that can't be more productive won't survive in economic terms. The comments from our French colleague on the top-up hectare-related payments. I'm familiar with that issue in Seja. We've discussed that matter at depth. There are many farmers working in the wine sector or the fruit farming sector, and there's no per hectare payment there. So I'm aware of the issues related to that particular debate.
So I suppose my two colleagues have covered a lot of questions, but just in relation to the active farmer that was brought up by the Netherlands and the UK, we just need to get a proper definition really of the active farmer so that young people can work with older farmers and they can be defined as the active farmer farming the land, but still the older farmer will get support as well. So that'll be able to keep two people in the industry, on a particular farm and work on that business. So that's probably extremely important. Then the question the comment from France about financing for young farmers. So the structures in place in New Zealand allow entrance a lot easier. So the first thing is farmers can get interest-only loans for the first couple of years. So their repayments are a lot less, and this is the most critical time, as Lawrence says earlier, when you're starting up your business, this is the most critical time to make sure that you can keep repayments, so that's extremely important. And secondly is the availability of chattel mortgages, so being able to use livestock as security on loans. A lot of young farmers will not have land to be able to secure loans, so structures have to be put in place whereby stock can be used as security. And I suppose finally the comment about access to land, and would share milking structure be able to adapt it to other industries? The the reason it's so successful in the dairy industry in New Zealand is because there's a constant income coming in every 2 to 3 weeks in the milk check, and that's been able to divide it out to the share milker and the landowner, and therefore they can cover their expenses on a monthly basis. However, in other industries like sheep and beef, a lot of it's just a big lump sum when animals are sold at the end of the year, so it'd be a lot more difficult to put that kind of a structure in place for them industries. Thanks for your questions.
Thank you. I have 6 more delegates offering. We have to finish absolutely at 1:45, so I'm going to take the 6 together, 2 minutes each. So first is Mr. Yannikis Garaval from Cyprus.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first please allow me to congratulate the speakers on their presentations. In the framework of Cyprus Presidency, significant amendments and promoted on the operation of the Young Farmers Scheme. These amendments aimed mainly to clarify and simplify the calculation method with a view to ensuring practicability and proportionality of annual payments, avoid unequal treatment of young farmers across the EU, and limiting the risk of unused funds under the scheme. The support granted to young farmers through the implementation of the direct payments regulation ensures the use of simplified and efficient tools which provide incentive to young people to get involved with agriculture. Currently, young farmers in Cyprus benefit from the rural developer programs because rural developer regulations allow for greater flexibility and better targeting. In this direction, Cyprus urges the Council to convey a positive message to the younger generation of farmers, but undertaking commitment to apply a young farmer scheme in at least one of the 2 pillars. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Pat Deering from the Irish Oireachtas.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I'd just like to compliment the enthusiasm of the 3 speakers and wish them well in their futures. Just a couple of issues. First of all, I'd like to highlight this issue earlier on with the previous presentation. I think it's welcome to see the proposals for the young farmers coming in the new CAP reform. But I do think also there has to be some incentive for the older farmers to exit the system to make room for the young farmers, be it financial or otherwise. For example, we quoted figures earlier on about the high proportion of farmers who are over 80 years of age. That's a very, very old age for anybody to be actively working in a labour-intensive area. I think it's an area that needs to be addressed. In recent years in Ireland, for example, agriculture has become very popular again. In times gone by, unfortunately, a number of agriculture-related, I suppose, families and people who were traditional farm families moved to a different industry, which is now unfortunately collapsed. But those people are now coming back into the system. And I would see it important that those who will come back into the system now will be educated for the future in farming. I think it's important that there will be a structure put in place for those. Also, I think we have to look at it in 2 ways. That's number one. And secondly, I think getting more non-traditional farm people interested in farming as a career. You know, anybody outside of rural areas in Ireland in particular, it wouldn't see farming as a career at all. And to encourage and to educate them that there is a career in farming other than some other form of industry. The second point I'd like to make is regards, I suppose, James highlighted the model in New Zealand and how it would work and how it might potentially work in other EU countries. And this is an issue that my colleague from England referred to earlier on. In New Zealand, James mainly spoke about the dairying industry and the success of dairying and going exclusively dairying. I suppose in our part of the world, there is a lot of mixed farming. And I think one compensates from the other. If you have a bad year, we say, for example, in tillage or in beef, the dairying compensates for that. Is it dangerous, in your opinion, putting all our eggs into one basket so that maybe we could have a bad year, a couple of years, and all of a sudden we're in severe financial trouble? How would we sort that problem out going forward? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Anders Johansson from the Swedish Parliament.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It's very nice to have young people here in the room right now, and it is a problem that the age of the owner and the farmers, and it is a problem that the access for young farmers is that very hard. So, to my questions, is more money in the system, is that the real answer? So far, the subsidy has raised price of land all over the EU. Maybe in the short time, it could help with special treatment for the young farmers, but my question is it in the long term? So please, will you give us some comments on that? Thank you.
Thank you. Now, from the Belgian-Flemish Parliament, we have Mr. Stefan Sint-Oben.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the right introductions. On behalf of the Flemish Parliament, I can say that we support the point of view that 2% of the annual national maximum in each member state ought to be earmarked for an annual payment to young farmers. This payment to young farmers must, however, be calculated in such a manner that all of the resources are effectively allocated to young farmers so as to avoid unused resources. And I know, Mr. Chair, that it is not within the competence of the CAP, the CAP reform, but I think it's a major concern how we can provide also in the future a new generation of young farmers. That is a major concern. Because in Flanders, for example, agriculture education starts at the age of 12. And I think we have to take some measures to also make youngsters below the age of 12 to pick up an interest for farming, because the young farmers we are talking here today are 35, 40 years old, but in 20 years they will be 60, and we will talk about the necessity of young farmers also within 20 years. So my question is, it's not a matter of agriculture competence, perhaps educational competence, but how can we make youngsters below 20 years pick up an interest for farming?
Thank you. Now our colleague from Northern Ireland, Joe Byrne. Mr. Joe Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations on the chairing of the conference, and thanks for the invitation to be here. I greatly enjoyed the three presentations. They're very logical and analytical, and they're looking to the future. I would like to ask Dr. Pierce, is there any tracking being done on those that enter these agricultural courses and how many actually go on to practical farming? Secondly, in relation to Laurent France, he identified the two key bottlenecks of access to land and access to credit. Would he elaborate on how that can be handled in relation to access to credit in the future, given that the banking system has very much given loans in the past here tied into security relating to the actual farms? And lastly, to James Murphy, which I greatly enjoyed about the New Zealand experience, is he really advocating sustainable intensification for the dairy sector in the future? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. And finally, from the Greek Hellenic Parliament, we have Mr. Skrekos Konstantinos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the Greek delegation, I would like to thank you for the hospitality. And indeed, I would like to outline the fact that we are facing a very real crisis of renewal in agriculture within the next 10 years. Farmers are getting older in most of the Europe member states, and fewer young people are entering farming. And if this trend continues, then fewer and fewer farmers will be producing our food in the future. And this loss of farmers will severely impact our food security, the capacity of our farms to provide Europeans with most of the healthy foods we need to thrive in the 21st century. Therefore, we must say clearly that we need young farmers, we need new farmers, and we need more farmers. Now, because of the crisis, we have begun to witness a strong interest in healthy food and farming. As increasing numbers of young people from farm and non-farm backgrounds are striving to build entrepreneurial, economically viable and ecologically sustainable farm enterprises. There are many challenges facing these new entrants, yet there are also new opportunities. They bring skills, connections and passion that can lead to innovation and renewal. And the growth I don't. What I would like to outline and point out is that, of course, the 2% top-up payments would help and support these new farmers. But I think that at this time we have to be more innovative in finding new money in order to support them, knowing the cuts in the budget, in the European budget. And maybe now is the time that we have to look maybe for new ways and new tools to support these new farmers that are trying to make new investments both in production but also in the whole supply chain. Maybe now is the time for a venture capital financed by the European Investment Bank that could help this whole idea. And the growth, I think, also organic products, organic production that can be produced by younger farmers that can shorten the supply chain and directly sell these products could help also those farmers to survive and in the future. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'll go back to the panel.
Okay, I realise we're short on time, so I'll just make a few quick comments. Pat Deering's comment from Ireland about incentivising older farmers to exit, I think is really important. But there's an education piece required for older farmers there too, who, you know, there's a lot of myths around long-term leasing and what happens if they release the land and squatting rights, and, you know, just myths that are there, so that they feel confident that if they leased out their land on a long-term lease, that there are no long-term repercussions for that for them. And in terms of students from non-farming backgrounds entering, we have seen increased numbers of those in the system without doubt. But in terms of promoting it as a career, we have to be sure first that there's a career there for them in it. So that's our job. You know, so first the careers need to come, and we'll see the students from non-farming backgrounds flow into that. So I think that that's, and in terms of putting all the eggs into one basket, the profitability of dairy with or without the single farm payment is higher in Ireland than any figures that we have compared to other industries. So I suppose that's why there's such a focus on it. From the Flemish Parliament, the comment about stimulating interest before, you know, while students are very young. We've seen a resurgence of agricultural science as a science subject in Ireland in the last number of years. And so that's the students taking this subject from the age of about 12 to 17 prior to going into college, and that has really increased. And in terms of promoting public awareness campaigns, and we have an initiative here called AgriAware, that very much helps too. Just to finalise Joseph Byrne's comment from Northern Ireland, I don't know the percentage that go into practical farming. I know that there's a high percentage, and a certain number of our courses want to do it, but we haven't done a career study or a post-college study in a number of years, so I'm afraid I can't answer that with a definite figure. I'll pass on.
Gentlemen, 1 minute each. Okay.
I'd like to pick up on a couple of points that were made. The first from the Swedish representative. They wondered whether money would solve the problem, or more money. More money is not the only solution to the problem, or to all of the problems that a young farmer faces. Where taking over a farm is increasingly expensive and the financial requirements are greater and greater on young farmers, clearly you have to have a sound financial framework, so more money is a help, but it's not the only help. The whole design is essential. Money's an element of that, but not the be-all and end-all. The second point is in reaction to what Greece was saying. We're familiar with the situation in some European countries where youth unemployment has reached startling dimensions, and there's nobody in the room that can be happy with that situation. Farming, it only represents 2 or 3% of the working population in a number of countries. But in areas with high unemployment, in some countries, 1 in 6 jobs depend on farming to some extent, indirect employment. So more jobs and more job creation can only be a good thing. And especially because so many sectors depend on farming and agriculture. It would be a way of generating more jobs and dealing with youth unemployment.
2 questions. The one, the Irish and Northern Ireland question, kind of answers. Going all dairy farming or looking towards a lot of expansion in dairy farming. As Karina said, it is the most profitable industry, and that's why young farmers are going to look at that. Young farmers coming in are going to look at these models and see that dairy farming produces the most money, so that's the angle they're going to take. In New Zealand, that's the same way, so that's why a lot of people have gone into it. And is it sustainable? Well, if we can get a production system that will make money on the bad years, then it'll be sustainable. So that's the production system we need to follow. So going down the line of grass-based system is the way we need to follow. And just on the Sweden question there, personally, I don't think direct payments are the solution. We need to be advocating supports. So Greece are looking for new ideas, and that's what we need to be doing. We need to be looking at stock supports and interest relief for young farmers and loans. Thank you.
Thank you. We had to rush it a little bit at the end, but that concludes session 2. Could I just say very quickly, the Irish presidency wanted to make an emphasis on the importance of young farmers, that without them we won't achieve any targets. They are the future, and it's absolutely nonsense to expect that we can achieve them, whether in Ireland or anybody else, without giving young farmers with the talent and the enthusiasm the opportunity. Just to say now that buffet lunch will be served in the coach house, which you will be escorted to by members of staff. It's not that far, but I would recommend you bring your coats. And we will resume at 2:30 sharp here in the afternoon when we discuss common fisheries policies. Thank you.